The short answer is our leaders did this. This is not an act of God. It's not the result of economic collapse in this country. America did not run out of housing. Instead, a determined group of well-funded ideologues decided to make it easier to live on the streets in this country while doing drugs. An employed alcoholic called Basil Humphrey enrolled in a rehab program in Boise, Idaho. When Humphrey refused to stop drinking, the rescue mission kicked him out. A huge corporate law firm in New York City called Lathem&Watcans took an interest in the case. Now, typically, Lathem&Watcans represents Wall Street banks and prominent Democratic office holders. But the firm wanted to change vagrancy laws to increase homelessness. We don't know. But the firm filed a lawsuit on Basil Humphrey's behalf against the city of Boise. In fact, the court ruled cities have an obligation to provide free housing to the homeless at public expense. The case was known as Martin versus Boise, and it had exactly the effect that Lathem&Watcans intended. Across the country no longer had an obligation to protect the public and public spaces from drug addicts who decided to live in them. Now, what is homelessness prevention? Well, of course, it's the opposite of what they call it, as always. Here's Seattle's interpretation of homelessness prevention.
A handful of Seattle's more than 12,000 homeless will soon be going from the street to a new apartment with stunning views of the Space Needle and Puget Sound. Using part of its share of the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, the city bought 3 brand new apartment buildings for $50 million for 165 homeless, a price of $300,000 per unit. In Los Angeles, Skid Row is about to get a new neighbor, a 19-story high-rise for homeless, costing taxpayers $160 million or $580,000 per unit. Even if it means buying new buildings at market rate from developers.
Seattle allocated just $10 million total for its small business stabilization fund designed to keep family businesses from going bankrupt during the COVID lockdowns. $667 million on something called the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. And yet, at the very same time, San Francisco's Department of Children, Youth, and Families gets less than half that amount. Since the city's budget for homelessness assistance was $68 million last year. At the very same time, the city of Austin spent just $3.5 million in new loans for struggling small businesses, and only $7 million for, quote, mission-critical infrastructure and deferred maintenance at city facilities, like it's grown by 10% in just 2 years. For homelessness, you get a lot more of it. In Los Angeles, politicians have spent billions, quote, fighting homelessness. This has been accompanied, of course, by a massive increase in the number of people who are homeless. That was supposed to fix the problem, did it? Homelessness in Los Angeles jumped 15% just last year. So this year, LA will spend more, close to $1 billion on the homeless in 2022. Crushed by the city's lunatic COVID restrictions, you ask? What do they get? Well, they get $62 million total. The city's gang reduction program gets about half that. So politicians in Los Angeles are at the very least very clear about their priorities. What has this done to LA? We don't have to look far to see the answer to that. He walked into a furniture store on the west side of Los Angeles and murdered a graduate student who was working alone there. He's not to look far to see the answer to that. Last week, a homeless man walked into a furniture store on the west side of Los Angeles and murdered a graduate student who was working alone there. He stabbed her to death for no apparent reason and then walked out. He's still at large. She was 24, now she's dead.
On giving back